Namaste, Jai Hind, and you're on the Super Saturday Debate. I'm Anand Narasimhan. It's all about the Twitter files. Is it just the tip of the iceberg? It's a question that we ask because Elon Musk has made a stunning revelation on the Hunter Biden story and in what is being called the Twitter files. Citing the report of another journalist, Elon Musk claimed free speech suppression by the previous Twitter administration. According to journalist Matt Taibbi, Twitter played a vital role in suppressing the Hunter Biden story on the social media platform. Taibbi says that Twitter's former head of legal policy, Vijaya Gadde, played a key role in the decision, and company CEO Jack Dorsey had no information about it. Now, here are the details. Let's try and understand what happened in this entire cover-up. Twitter's role was that it removed story links very clearly and posted unsafe warnings. It also blocked the story. It also blocked the story's transmission via direct message. This tool is reserved for extreme cases like child pornography. Locked former White House spokeswoman's account for citing an article. Twitter defended the moves by citing hacked material policy. Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey was unaware about this censorship. That's what is being said so far. But the question that we ask is this just the tip of the iceberg, ladies and gentlemen? Was there a lot more that this so-called platform, which many allege is as good as a publishing house, did it do that? That's the big question. Let's try and get into that debate. Joining us this evening, Vineet Goenka, BJP spokesperson, Anang Mittal, political analyst, Tushar Gupta of the Swarajya magazine with us. And we should also have Pandit Satish K. Sharma joining us in just a bit. Namaste, gentlemen. Thank you very, very much. My first question to you, Vineet Goenka, does this come as a surprise? When Elon Musk says that Matt Taibbi has come out and put these details and that Twitter suppressed and orchestrated perhaps a suppression on its platform, does it come out or did it come as a surprise to you?
Ram, Anand, it is not a surprise. You have covered a story when we did it back home. I'll give you a couple of examples. There was killing and massacres of Hindus in Bangladesh. And those photographs and videos were shown, retweeted. And there was an anger being shown by Prabhu Radharamanji of ISKCON. And his account was blocked under various reasons. Basically what he did is he retweeted the material which had come from there. While the original handle continued to show that particular gruesome act, but his account was blocked. We also saw that when a Malaysian former president, Muhammad, he said that Muslims have right to behead anybody who speaks against the Prophet. That tweet was there for a couple of days even after protests been across the world. Whereas in India, we also saw one more thing. One of the famous lawyers, he wrote something about the court wanted Twitter to block that particular content. And they said, you order us, we will not do it without that. But whereas we have seen that in various cases, they proactively not only block the content, but also the accounts itself. So it was specifically biased. It was biased for religion, it was biased for country specific. We have seen the map of India was distorted, ministers of India were blocked for temporarily, and it also has a religious bias. And the free speech was suppressed under the name of moderation. And they did two types of moderation, which I would like to tell your audience. One, they curtailed communication from one section of society, and whereas they pushed deliberately, amplified deliberately contents from the taste which they wanted to do it. And one more thing, which they had teams here who would times wear the hat of policy representative of Twitter, and times they would wear the hat of marketing. They would go and meet the minister when they wanted to be as a policy representative of Twitter, and when India-specific questions were asked to them, they said, we are from the marketing team. We don't know what Twitter as a policy would be doing it. Right. And we all know, I don't want to name those two females because it will not be appropriate here, but there are a couple of FIRs being filed across the country because they knew that funding was coming from banned terrorist organization SFJ, which was promoting certain content, that of referendum, which is a separatist referendum, which was protested by individuals, country as a specific. There were police complaints, yet they continued to show that particular thing. And these two ladies, these two females, they were to answer the courts. Surprisingly, Twitter never took action on them. And they very well, nicely, they are working, drawing their salaries while they were aware that anti-India funding was done. And I'm naming it, SFJ did that particular part. And they had an audacity to hire Harish Salve against me in Supreme Court so that I don't ask people to file FIR against them and or all the FIRs get slapped. So we have seen very particularly here Twitter not only at the central level under the leadership of Vijaya Gade, but in India also this malice, this bias was there. Of course, there are reports which I don't know if they are true, whether they did some favoritism in the elections there in US and whether one particular party or a candidate suffered and another party or a candidate got a push. But back in India, I gave you two examples. One where Prabhu Radharaman ISKCON handle was banned when he was actually retweeting and objecting on the content which was coming on some other person's handle. On the other side, they kept promoting content coming from SFJ, and my complaint in the court also talks about that particular part.
Well,
so
there were
Twitter
a lot
at
of
the
lot of
international
complaints.
level and India level both have to answer.
There were a lot of complaints time and again. You yourself are a litigant in one of the matters in the way Twitter was conducting and its algorithms were being programmed to amplify certain aspects, to suppress certain aspects. And now Twitter Files 1 talks about suppression. In fact, Elon Musk has tweeted about 13 hours ago where he says, tune in for episode 2 of the Twitter Files tomorrow. So is it just tip of the iceberg that we are looking at? And is it going to be one country, one issue at a time? And are there going to be a lot of skeletons tumbling out of the closet? And does this now not, was this never a platform but a publishing house, which was perhaps up there for the highest bidder or perhaps following one particular ideological or political narrative, Anang Mittal?
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I don't think we're going to be able to solve the issue of whether Twitter or other tech companies that involve social media are platforms or publishers. And I do believe that yes, in the larger sense of how these cultures and how these companies behave, that they do tend to lean liberally. Personally, I worked for YouTube. I was a Republican and I am a Republican and I worked there. So full disclosure that, my own bias may be at play, whatever I say here. But I don't think that the question here is really about the bias. I think you can be biased, but as long as you're open about it and as long as your policies are fair, that is really what is at question here. That Twitter put the thumb on the scales during a very crucial election in 2020 and ensured the suppression of a story so that you couldn't even send it in direct messages or you couldn't even share it, and that the press secretary, an official of the United States, was blocked from communicating a story out there. And I think that's really the unethical part of it here. And some of the liberals, some of the left-leaning people who are covering for Twitter, who are maybe friends with people at Twitter who used to be there, are saying, well, this is just, a simple story about, some, CD material that Hunter Biden was putting out or that was on his laptop from being blocked on Twitter, and that pornographic material was just being removed. This is nothing, there's nothing to see here. But the real question here and the real unethical behavior here is that Twitter and Twitter executives and people who were connected with the government, people who were previously connected with the Biden government, the Obama government, and are now still connected, played a role. And in fact, many national security officials, when that story was suppressed, came out and said it was Russian disinformation. And when they were questioned later on, when the New York Times, when other liberal newspapers this year have said that the Hunter Biden laptop is real, when they were questioned, the reporters were met with silence. They have not said, the people in 2020 who said this is all Russian disinformation, who were very much vested in taking down Donald Trump, are now completely quiet on their open letter that they signed in 2020 saying that this is all fake. And now now the newspapers are saying it's not fake, they're completely silent. And so that's where the accountability lies. That those are the people that we should be asking hard questions of. Why did you say it was Russian disinformation? Why did you think that this story deserved to be suppressed? And what do you have to say about it now that the truth is being revealed?
No, it misused the word platform per se, because as a platform, you're supposed to be neutral. You're supposed to give a medium of expression or a platform for expression for everybody. The moment you start taking sides, not that you should not take sides, you're free to take sides. The moment you start taking sides, then you stop being a platform and then you become a publishing house. That's what happens. So if a Jack Dorsey took a position against Trump, as somebody who's running a platform, then clearly he has ideological leanings. If he said that he's going to donate a certain number of bitcoins and certain value towards pushing a particular political ideology, then he no longer remains an independent or a neutral. Now, nor does his platform. Although in this case, it is said that he was unaware. That's what Elon Musk is claiming. Now, who is Vijay Agade? Pandit Satish Sharma is also with us. And I have Tushar. Thank you very much, Tushar and Panditji, for, I know you have pressing personal commitments, but despite that, you've made the effort to join us at this point. Now, Vijay Agade was at the helm of the censorship exercise at Twitter. We just put that out here. She was accused of refusing to take down child porn from Twitter. And this is an allegation that surfaced, it's been made in the past, played a key role in putting down the Hunter Biden story. She has been accused of suppressing Republican voices and banned Trump and other right-wing figures from Twitter. The moment you ban certain people, the moment you take a position, then you stop being neutral. You become an ideological platform or a publishing house, not an independent social media platform. But Pandit Satishji, is there more to it than meets the eye? Is this just the tip of the Twitter files or the Twitterberg?
It's a pleasure to speak with you, Anandji, as always, and thank you for accommodating me on my erratic schedule this evening. But you're quite right. There is a lot more which has yet to be discovered. I can share with you that a team of lawyers who I'm in touch with have already submitted queries and freedom of information requests regarding the Leicester issues, regarding a number of instances where requests were made to perhaps require Twitter to respond with equality and fairness with regard to Hindu-phobic attacks. We had so many Islamist attacks on Twitter against many of the leaders and indeed many of the speakers in the Indian space and the Hindu space, and they were ignored. So this evidence that's now coming out is seeming to indicate that there was a bias, and the bias was contrary both to the Constitution of the United States, but also to Twitter's own guidelines. We have all been on the receiving end of those little messages which say, you have breached our community guidelines. What the revelations now reveal is that, in fact, they breached every single guideline imaginable in a manner which does seem to indicate bias and political positions. And our concern is that they also had platformed positions on religious positions. And that would be an extremely serious issue. I say that's virtually a contravention of the First Amendment. And if Congress was involved and intervened to make any of these decisions, then it opens up a whole new can of worms. Anandji, there is one aspect of this which is actually even more worrying. And I speak on civilizational issues. We have the United States as being the moral policeman of the world. And yet when I look at it now, we have a catalogue of disasters one after the other. We had the subprime finance fiasco. Then we had the Iraq war, which was another subprime war fiasco, if I could. We've had subprime democracy. The elections were worthy of a banana republic. The United States elections, the world watched in horror as what was going on. We then had subprime pharma with Pfizer refusing to disclose valid data for 75 years. And now we have subprime global telecommunications. My worry is, are we witnessing the collapse of an extraordinarily large and hitherto powerful democracy? And it would seem that we are.
In this case, was there evidence, or do you have reasons to believe that there was perhaps pushing of a particular narrative and suppression of another? And this legal process is going to take some time. So are you going to move on it legally? Are you going to ask for formal responses from Twitter and other organizations? How do you plan to go about it, Panditji?
Well, the information I have is that processes are already underway. The whole Leicester scenario and the run-up to the Leicester scenario, we were actually accumulating a lot of data. We saw time and time again that fake news was proliferated. Requests were made to Twitter to take those individual elements down, and they did not take them down. I also know that the Indian government on numerous occasions had requested fake stories, fake news, inflammatory tweets to be taken down. They were not taken down. And yet there have been many instances where completely inappropriate censorship was applied to totally harmless tweets and messages. And so, yes, there is already evidence of that bias. What one aspect of the request that's been made to Twitter is actually to try and determine whether Twitter itself is culpable or whether the employees were acting outside of the terms of their employment and outside their authority. And that will be a very interesting development. Once we get that information, then we'll be happy to share it in the public domain.
Right. So this is big, that you're also planning to look at the legal options possible with respect to what happened at Leicester. Panditji, please stay with me if you have the time, another 5 minutes, because I'll come back to you for another comment, because I want to bring in Tushar Gupta, because he's been at the receiving end. His organization has been at the receiving end. They have repeatedly complained to Twitter over the last 2 to 3 years, along with many others, that what they were putting out somehow was deliberately getting quote unquote suppressed. Tushar, and you guys have done a story today on Swarajya.
Yes. Good evening, Anand. Look, I have written a lot about this, and this was when the entire government handles were taken down overnight. The ministers were suddenly losing the blue ticks and whatnot. My problem, Anand, has always been one. If you are a platform, you cannot be a publisher. And if you want to act as a publisher, do not claim to be a platform, because different rules apply to both of them, North Pole and South Pole. That's the difference there is. Now, what we're learning now, of course, the entire management of Twitter has been changed. The entire ownership of Twitter has been changed. But what we are looking in the pre-Elon Musk era at Twitter, Twitter was going by all the rules of a platform. When they were questioned about by the Indian government or even by organizations like us, that why are certain policies being implemented only against our organization while other publishers are being given a free hand in the media. It was all about moderation, content moderation, Twitter policy. Even to the government of India, on one occasion, Twitter actually replied that Twitter's policy are dependent, or rather created in accordance with the principles of Twitter and not the law of the land. So for a long time, Twitter has been playing this very convenient dual game where they shake off the responsibility, claiming they're a platform while they act as a publisher. Now, my problem, Anand, is that what we've seen today is not even the tip of the iceberg. It's the tip of the tip of the tip of the iceberg. Because I have an anticipation that the next chapter would be about Donald Trump and how Trump was taken off Twitter in a very opaque manner. Because I remember the thread Jack Dorsey posted that day. He said it's all come down to Twitter's content moderation policies, which again is very ambiguous. So for a long time, Twitter has been operated in a very opaque, ambiguous fashion. And today we learn that the people at the helm of the affairs were actually exercising their political leanings, their political affiliations, and worse, their political connects to run the platform in a certain fashion. Now, this should be a lesson for governments all across the world. Because earlier it was Hunter and Biden, it will be Trump, of course. But what if it impacts policy making for the governments? What if tomorrow Twitter suppresses stories that prove that the CA was a right law? For example, while giving more space to stories which are from Shaheen Bagh. Just a simple example, Anand. So this is a problem. Now the public platforms are acting like publishers, and the governments really need to take action. This is a time where every platform needs to be pulled up, not just Twitter, even Meta, even all other platforms.
Vineet Goenka?
I think this was very clear in the case in India when we were facing this particular part, and this I'm talking to as individual, not as the party spokesperson. But let me tell you, when I met the Twitter representative in Delhi, and I made her aware that there were sponsored ads from the terrorist organization, and the cold blank face of her, and she said, "We know it," and that probably made me to understand that they were doing things with understanding what they are doing. And that probably, those are the files which have to be now tapped once again. Once again, we have to check whether this was done with an intention of not only bias, but also the malice of terrorist funded money. So here we see 2-3 things. One is that there is a bias against the religion, bias against the country, bias against a political system, bias against a philosophy, but coupled with funding. I would like to ask one question which I'm always been asking myself and I didn't get answer. If Twitter was always in losses, who was funding it? I read one statement from Elon Musk which he said he has to build Twitter, otherwise it will be an unviable organization, and which is true. How does somebody get this much kind of funding? Who are the people who are interested to fund this kind of losses? So if they were not there. So I have 2 or 3 suggestions which I'm certain, which I will also give to the establishment as it is possible. One, to have KYC, because there is no transparency in Twitter. How many followers you have and who are those followers? You don't know who are these people who are retweeting, and you will be surprised to know people who are not known in the society, they get a number of retweets or likes which is unparalleled, whereas you as a very famous journalist or people like you, they get limited number of retweets or likes. So that gives a question whether there is a transparency issue on the likes, Twitter, retweets or the followers which are there. So there has to be a KYC so that somebody can be nailed in case if there is an anti-national or an anti-establishment or an anti-society content which is being coming out deliberately, distorted contents especially which were they coming out. So there are 2-3 things which the society has to ask itself.
Right.
Why Twitter was pushing one particular content whereas they were curtailing another content. So this and we as Indians
unless there was an ideological bias or a position, or they were getting money to do the same, why would they want to doctor their algorithm?
Anand,
Yes, Tushar.
Anand, I'll give you another.
So Anand, I'll just take that 10 seconds before the other learned spokesperson.
Okay, we need 10 seconds and then Tushar.
Just 10 seconds. I'll just complete that. So I had given evidences of this money coming to the lady. I'm restraining myself to take name of both the ladies here, and I'm very tempted to take that. But they know, and they come from very influential thing, and I could see on their face that it was fun for them to have this kind of funding coming through, and there was
they knew what was happening. They knew where the money was coming. They knew what they were doing was bordering on
of that.
Was downright brazen, illegal, or perhaps against the very grain of Bharat. But they said, go ahead and we'll do it. And then now they're fighting you in court to say, what can you do about it? We'll try and take you to we'll fight you.
And see the audacity, they can hire Harish Salve or those kind of lawyers because the money which they have.
Correct. So
money which they have is something which is
right. I have limited time. I want to go back to yes, Tushar, and then Pandit Satish Sharma, and then Anang Mittal. Yeah,
Anand, I'll give you another example of how organizations like Swaraj are penalized. We've talked about the hypocrisy of fact checkers. Now, this is from 3-4 years ago. One of the biggest platforms of the world launched a fact-checking network. Now, the applications that were sent to that fact-checking network by media publishers were judged on the basis of the political leanings of the person at the helm of the affairs. So someone like an Alt News was given an instant approval, whereas someone like a Swaraj was denied that entire right for fact-checking something. Now, this news was in the public domain. So Alt News had as much right to fact-check it as much as Swaraj. But this platform in question actually gave the backing, or rather the validation, to one platform with one political leaning while denying to other platform. This is also another example of how bias from platforms against media publishers work.
No, but not just about the bias, but it's also about the damage in society if you're allowing misinformation to spread or not a balance of views to spread in society, and you're allowing a amplification of certain voices whereas suppression of others. Pandit Satish Sharma.
Gee, it's absolutely true that the absence of bias has, the presence of bias has now been pretty much established as fact. Nobody from the Twitter files has produced evidence of similar bias to do with the Republican side of things. And so if we just extrapolate that to what actually happened, electioneering is very tightly controlled. Budgets are very tightly controlled. How much you can spend on advertising and publicity is very, very tightly controlled. And yet what seems to have happened here is that Twitter was leveraged to possibly influence the American election. The consequences of that, really, it was done with the connivance of the Democratic Party, is that we are really looking at an impeachment. There should absolutely be impeachment processes instituted against this. What will that do to American democracy? That's just to do with the American democracy. Now, we also know that during the run-up to the various, shall we say, the right foot in, right foot out shenanigans at number 10 Downing Street, there were similar complaints made that from the left perspective, there was always a deluge, and from the actual right and centre-right perspective, there was hardly any representation. So I think this is just the beginning. We are actually going to see every election where Twitter has had some sort of influence being re-scrutinized, and I think the consequences have only just started to be understood.
So if it was Cambridge Analytica then on Facebook, is it Twitter on this platform, and did they deliberately tweak the algorithms? I've run out of time, but the story does not die down. And Anang Mittal, I hope the Republicans will take note and wonder what's going to come in Twitter files too in a few hours from now. So we will continue this story, and I look forward to you joining. I apologize, I cannot come across to you because I'm way over time. but we'll take your comment in again when we speak with you again. Thank you very much for joining us on the Super Saturday Debate.